that is called as master gland of endocrine system of human being. Pituitary gland. First come to the gross anatomy of the pituitary gland. In diameter, pituitary gland found approximately of 1 centimeter in size, and it has approximately 0.5 to 1 gram of weight. Pituitary gland found in hypophyseal fossa of sphenoid bone, that is also called as sella turcica. If we see physiologically, then pituitary gland has three parts. One is called as anterior pituitary gland, that makes around 75% of total mass of pituitary gland, and it is called as adenohypophysis also. The second part of pituitary gland, that is called as posterior pituitary gland, makes around 25% of total mass of pituitary gland, and it is called as neurohypophysis also. The third part, that is the intermediate part in between the anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary, that is called as pars intermedia. Pars intermedia found rudimentary in human beings, but found actively in lower animals. We will discuss about this pars intermedia later on. Basically, pars intermedia is part of anterior pituitary gland. Now see the embryological development of anterior pituitary gland and posterior pituitary gland. In origin, anterior pituitary gland is different from the posterior pituitary gland because anterior pituitary gland originates from the ectoderm of hoof of oral cavity in embryological life. In embryological life, this hoof of oral cavity outwardly grow and causes upward pouching. So it forms the upward pouch that is called as Rathke's pouch. At maturation, the lumen of this Rathke's pouch remain intact only as a small cleft in anterior pituitary gland. At maturation, this anterior pituitary gland gets separated from the oral cavity with the help of sphenoid bone. Now come to the posterior pituitary gland embryological development. As I told you that it originates from the neuroectodermal tissue. So, in embryological life, it descends down at edge outward pouching and form the posterior pituitary gland. So basically it originates from the basal part of hypothalamus as median eminence or tuber cinerea. So it gets elongated downwardly, form infundibular stem and finally dilated as the infundibular process. The lumen of this part gets obliterated inferiorly at maturation. So that was the embryological development of anterior pituitary gland and posterior pituitary gland. So at maturation, if we see that anterior pituitary gland and posterior pituitary gland come so close that they form a one organ, not the secretory. So come here, we will discuss again the parts of anterior pituitary gland and parts of posterior pituitary gland. Anterior pituitary gland, as I told you, it is also called as adenohypophysis, that makes around 75% part of total mass of pituitary gland. Adenohypophysis is made up of three parts. The last and dilated part of anterior hypophysis is called as pars distalis. The tuberal part of anterior adenohypophysis is called as pars tuberalis, and the part in between the posterior pituitary and anterior lobe is called as pars intermedialis. So adenohypophysis basically has three parts: pars tuberalis, pars distalis, pars medialis, and this adenohypophysis attaches to the floor of brain or to the basal part of hypothalamus with the help of hypophyseal stalk. Now come to the neurohypophysis. It is made up of again three parts. One is median eminence, that is the part of hypothalamus. It gets elongated into the second part, that is called as infundibular stem, and then it gets dilated in the form of third part, that is called as pars nervosa or infundibular process or posterior lobe of pituitary gland. So again, posterior pituitary gland attached with the hypothalamus with the help of neural stalk that mainly has axons from the supraventricular or paraventricular nuclei of hypothalamus. Now let's see one by one parts of anterior pituitary gland. As I discussed well earlier, it is made up of pars distalis, pars tuberalis, pars intermedialis. and it is also called as adenohypophysis developmentally, and it is discussed previously. It is made up of ectodermal tissue in origin from the roof of oral cavity and arises from pharyngeal epithelium as upward growth called as Rathke's pouch. Now come to the important part of anterior pituitary gland, that is the histology of anterior pituitary gland. If we see histologically, then anterior pituitary gland made up of three cells basically. One is chromophore cell, second is chromophil cell, third one are folliculostellate cells. The chromophore cells, these are agranular cells. It means these cells does not have any kind of secretory granules. Chromophore cell basically found in pars tuberales part of anterior pituitary gland, but chromophore cells are also found as precursor of chromophil cells. These are the second type of cells in anterior pituitary gland, and these are very important cells because these cells has granules and are called as secretory granules. And these granules are of two types. One is acidophilic granules, the granules that receives strain from acidic dye like eosine and orange G. So cells that contains the acidophilic granule in the anterior pituitary glands are of two types. One is somatotrophs that secretes growth hormone or somatotrophin hormones. The second one cells are lactotrophs that secrete prolactin hormone and lactogenic hormone. While the cells of anterior pituitary gland that contain basophilic granules, it means they receives the staining from basophilic dye like hematoxylin. So there are two types of cells that contain basophilic granules. One is corticotrophs, second is thyrotrophs, and third one are gonadotrophs, but these are also called as delta cells. Corticotrophs secretes adenocorticotropic hormones like ACTH. Thyrotrophs secretes thyroid stimulating hormone and called as TSH, and gonadotroph cells secretes FSH and luteinizing hormones. Now come to the third cell, that is folliculostellate cells. Actually they sense the processes between the secretory cells, but recently they found that they secretes cytokines like interleukin 6 also. So that was the histology of anterior pituitary gland. So as I discussed in the previous slide, the acidophilic cells like somatotrophs and lactotrophs secretes their hormone, and somatotrophs secretes human growth hormone and act on target cells like bone and cartilage. And lactotrophs secretes prolactin that act on target tissue or cells like mammary gland of human being. In basophil cells like thyrotrophs secrete TSH that act on thyroid gland of human being. The corticotrophs secretes ACTH that act on adrenal gland, adrenal cortex of adrenal gland, and secretes glucocorticoids. And they also secretes melanocyte stimulating hormones that control the skin pigmentation in human being with the help of melanin pigment. And gonadotroph cells of pituitary gland secretes follicular stimulating hormone that stimulates sperm production in testes in male, and luteinizing hormone that secretes estrogen by ovary during ovulation. Now come to the parts of posterior pituitary gland. As we discussed earlier, it is made up of median eminence, infundibular stem, and dilated part of infundibular stem like infundibular process or pars nervosa or posterior lobe of posterior pituitary gland, and combinedly is called as neurohypophysis. Come to the histology of posterior pituitary gland. As we discussed about anterior pituitary gland, it was made up of three kinds of cells. Posterior pituitary gland are also made up of two kinds of cells and axon.